Welcome, everybody, to a conversation with a new show that I'm going to be premiering here on Severe MMA. It won't always be me. I will pass this off to the boys. They will have the opportunity to use this platform, to use this series. But what I want to do with it and what I hope we're able to do with it in the coming weeks, months, and however long we continue it is give everybody a little bit of a deeper insight into some of the athletes, the coaches, the commentators, the analysts, anybody connected to the fight game that you want to hear from. We want to tell a little bit more of their story. We want them to be able to come on here and share a little bit more of their story. And for this debut episode, I was happy to reach out to Tyson Chartier, the head coach, I guess, of the New England Cartel. I'll let you give the full rundown of all the things. But Tyson, thank you, man, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Spencer. Got the debut. I'm popping it off good, and hopefully this is the first of many for you guys. And it's cool to be able to tell our story, and you know, just maybe more for probably my family get the story out there and let them feel appreciated a little bit. But no, this is good. It's good. I like the concept.
Yeah. So let's start just with the if you had a business card or the top of the CV, what is the rundown of the various jobs and responsibilities you hold right now?
Yeah, so I run the cartel, the New England Cartel. We're a fight team out of New England. We're a small team right now. We have technically four fighters. They're all pro, two in the UFC and two prospects, and then a bunch of young guys that train, kind of like cross train with us. And we'll see what the future holds for like coaching other guys. And then I run Top Game Management, which is a management company that has a football division that I don't run. My partner Mike runs that. I run the MMA side, and we got about 30 fighters that we work with right now. And for the most part, it's mostly based out of New England, but I got a few out in Minnesota and um, Oklahoma, and just pockets from relationships that I have. But for the most part, out of New England, and then I try to get the guys when they're young, a couple pro fights or even amateurs, and see them all the way through. I good relationships with their coaches, and really just try to like just handle them the right way, like protect them, because there's a lot of like nefarious characters in this sport. And if there's someone that's good enough to go to the UFC and win some fights, like I try to get with their coaches, get with them, and try to just kind of guide them through the process of like making that dream come true, and you know keeping away from certain people and helping them a little bit. And yeah, I mean, and other than that, and then I got a wife, and we've been together 10 years, and we just had our 7-year anniversary, and we got 3 kids, 7, 4, and 3 right now. So our hands are full. So yeah, I mean, it's fun, man. I got my hands full, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
So happy anniversary. We'll get
Thank you.
to balancing all of those things. At some point, we'll get to the management side of it because I know everything sort of interconnects. We will work our way down that path. The first question I want to ask everybody when we do this is just what was your introduction to martial arts? What got you started to where eventually mixed martial arts becomes a thing in your life?
Just like any little brother, you kind of idolize your older brother. And I was actually the second oldest of 6 growing up, but my older brother, he was kind of my idol all the way through. I wanted to do everything that he did. And when he was a junior in high school, I was a freshman, and our high school got wrestling. I've never really thought of wrestling. I grew up playing every sport there was, the basics: football, baseball, basketball, those things. And when I got to high school, I just assumed I'd do football, basketball, and baseball. And my brother, going into his junior year, is like, "Hey, we're getting a wrestling team this year. I'm going to wrestle." So I guess I'm wrestling. So I joined the wrestling team, and did that all 4 years in high school. And that's what really got me into kind of like the martial arts side of things. And after, I went to college, and I walked on to a lacrosse team at Southern New Hampshire University. It used to be New Hampshire College when I went, but walked on a lacrosse team. I was just like athletic, but I didn't know how to play lacrosse, and I just figured it out. And I think by my senior year, I was starting, I was captain of the team, um, and then stayed on it in grad school. When I got my MBA, I was graduate assistant and helped do the recruiting for the lacrosse. And then after that, I was so bored, man. After grad school, I was working a full-time job. Man, this is awful. So I was playing like pickup basketball at a local gym, and my girlfriend at the time, her mom was like, "Oh, I saw some guy at a spinning class, and he said he was sore from jujitsu." And I was like, and I had seen the UFC a couple times. I was like, "I'll try jujitsu." So I went down and tried it out. And that's really like the introduction to wrestling is what made me think like, oh, I would love to do jujitsu.
So there's a bunch in there that I will unpack that we will get through.
I know I ramble a
No,
lot,
no,
man.
no, no. It's great. It sets up. That's why there's a book in front of me that I can scribble stuff down in. But as
Yeah.
a younger brother, 2 years apart, I fully understand, completely recognize and see the older brother's doing that. I guess that's what I'm doing. I want to play with him. I got that part.
Mhm.
So wrestling leads to jujitsu. Jujitsu leads to here we go. We eventually sort of transition into MMA. Was it? I know you had some amateur fights. Amateur went well. Not saying pro didn't necessarily go well. We'll get to that.
You know, it did
It went okay. You were above 500,
Oh, just barely.
but like, what was it just that competitive piece of, jujitsu leads to, then we do some striking, then we do some of this, and then, hey, why don't I try a fight? Like, is it just that simple of the progression and the competitive side?
I think it was a couple things. Like one was the challenge of it. You know, like I wanted to challenge myself to get uncomfortable and do because it sounds weird when I say like I coach fighters and I fought myself, like saying that like I really am kind of a pussy. Like I was always the kid that like, hey, wear glasses in the woods, don't swing that bat. And I'm a helicopter dad too. Like everything is death, And I was always super excited. I never got in street fights. I was like, oh, don't horseplay without a mouthpiece because I got my teeth knocked out playing basketball in grade school. So I was always really kind of like a big wuss when it came to like roughhousing and stuff. Because I was always thinking, oh, you don't want to get hurt, be careful. And then, so I knew something like the idea of fighting like really kind of scared me. And I knew it was a challenge, and I thought it would just be like a good character builder because it was the closest thing I could find to wrestling. And then parlay, with that was the camaraderie of your teammates. I know this is like a one-on-one sport, but you really do have a whole team getting you ready. You help get your team ready, and I miss that from wrestling. Like I played football my whole life, but if I see a football player that I played with, it's like you might not even say hi, But if you see someone you wrestle with, it's a big hug. How you doing? And it's like a real hug, and I miss that like genuine like teammate connection, and I feel like I got that on the MMA side, but it was never like I didn't fight on purpose. I don't think. I think it was a kid that was getting ready for a fight. We were at a jiu-jitsu school. No one there was fighting. I was like still a white belt, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to do an MMA fight." I'm like, "Oh, cool." He's like, "Do you want to spar?" I'm like, what the hell is sparring? And so I went in and I moved around with him a little bit, and I had no clue. But I wrestled, and he's like, "Do you want to corner me for my fight?" So me and the owner of the school ended up cornering for his fight, and that was the first time I'd ever gone to an MMA fight. And he got tapped out like the first round, and but it was like that was pretty freaking cool. I would love to like make that walk someday. But I skipped over like a big part of that, which was after I did my first jujitsu class on like a Friday. The next day, I actually flew out to Vegas for the 4th of July. I was going with my girlfriend at the time, and did the whole week. Actually, 4 or 5 days out in Vegas, and then on the way back, I see a guy in front of me with an Ultimate Fighter bag, and I had just started watching the UFC because I just took my first jiu-jitsu class, and so I tapped the guy on the shoulder, and I was like, "Oh, are you on the show?" And turned around, Dana White, and I was so new to the sport that I didn't even know Dana's name. I just said, "Oh, it's you." He's like, "Hey, how you doing?" I was like, "Hey, man, I love the UFC. Like, I just started watching. Like, I'm a big fan." He's like, "Oh, it's cool." He's like, and my girlfriend was like, "Calm down. Like, don't be a psycho." So we go down the jetway. Me and her sit down. 5 minutes later, who comes and sits next to her? I'm at the window. She's in the middle, and because I'm super chivalrous, right? And so I sit down. I don't know how. If it was my wife now, she'd be against the window probably. But somehow I got the window, and she sat in the middle. And then all of a sudden, Dana sits next to her, and he's like, "I guess I'm with you guys." And she looks over at me. She's like, "Do not be a fanboy." And I'm like, "I won't be. I won't be." And then we talked for literally 5 hours on the plane, and it was the week before Arlovsky fought Sylvia the second time. Okay. And he's like, "Bro, you got to come out and watch a fight. Have you ever seen one live?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "You got to come out." He's like, "I'm going to give you my assistant's number. Call her when you get off the plane." And that ends up being Donna Marcolini. She runs the USADA program now. I talk to her all the time. So I got off the phone. I called Donna. I have tickets. So I get a buddy to come out the next week to fly out to Vegas. We're going like, back out to Vegas. Actually, I just been out there. And watch the fights. And I remember like they dim the lights, that main event guy starts walking, and I'm like, I got to do this someday. I'm going to do this once, you know? And then I got back, and that's when I started sparring with Jay. Just coincidentally, he's like, can you help me spar? And I'm like I said, I don't even know what sparring is. But then I went and cornered him for his fight, and I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do this. And, you know, it's kind of surreal to think like that just by happenstance. I met him and
Right.
he gave me tickets and I want to do it. Now it's like, this will be my 8th event in a row that I'm walking out the main event fighter on the red corner, you know, like making that walk that made me like, you know, the house lights go down, you make that walk, you get to turn right. And yeah, it's just kind of crazy when you think of it that way.
Yeah. For anybody that thinks all the times Dana says, if you've never experienced a UFC event live, you have to because it's different than you can possibly understand. I'm not saying it just because I've been there and I work for the UFC in addition to working for SevereMMA. Tyson's not saying it just because he will be, as he said, cornering the fighter in the red corner here in a couple of weeks. It is different. The start of the main card montage plays to the Who's Baba O'Reilly. It's insane. The lights dim for the main event. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter what songs kick in. You get the chicken skin. You get the like, something big is happening here.
Yeah.
It's crazy that that is what got you into the like, oh yeah, I've got to do this at some point. So how far along from cornering and like getting that little bit of a bug to amateur debut?
Uh, it's probably a good, start training in 2 years, probably 2 years. Yeah, like 2.5 years. Cause I started training in July of like '06, and I think I had my first fight in October of '08. So yeah, it was about 2 years. And yeah, I think by the time I got my first fight, I was already a purple belt. Like because I was doing privates, training 6 days a week, plus doing one-on-ones. And I think at that point I was already a purple belt when I took my first fight.
I gotcha. And so not to like just breeze through amateur and stuff like that, but what for you, like when you started fighting amateur, did it click in as this is going to be the career for now? Because you mentioned in there MBA. So like got a business mind on you. You've got college background to support you going forward. Was it a thought of I'm going to do this professionally, or was it at this point still just like this is something fun to do to get that competitive side addressed?
No, it was just all competitive. I was making good money in tech sales. I was at like when I had my first fight, I was working at Oracle. I was like on the sales floor at
Okay.
Oracle, cutting weight in my cubicle, like under my dress. Like we'd wear like casual clothes. I'm here like trying to like wear like, you know, layered up with a trash bag under my polo shirt and like trying to sweat. And I'm like sweating. And it's funny because my coach had played football at Auburn. The guy that sat behind me played with Flutie at BC in football. So everybody that was around me was athletes. So they loved it. You know, they all went to the fight. So I'm like here, you know, doing my fake calls and all this, but I'm really thinking about my fight. And yeah, I was making good money. It was like I had a career. It was never any like delusions of like I'm going to do this full time. It was really just a hobby. And then I really latched on to the teammate aspect of it. It wasn't till like, you know, I never had any delusions to go into the UFC. Like we used to have guys come in, you know, and I won't say names, but like as I was still an amateur and UFC fighters would come in and do camps, and I would do well. Like I know my pro record makes it look like I sucked, but like when I was healthy, like I ended up having neck surgery, and you know I had a lot of injuries that just weren't good. But like when I was healthy, like I was able, like I was a good sparring partner for like some tough guys, and um, you know, it was fun to challenge myself against guys that you watch on TV. Then they come in and do camps, and you're submitting them, taking them down, and you know, feeling like, hey, listen, like if I actually fought this kid, like maybe I'd have a chance, you know. And that was like a confidence builder. But that was enough for me. Like I was making good money. I knew I was already like 32 when I took, or yeah, 30. I was 30 when I took my first fight, or 28, something like that. So I got into it too late, and I already had a really bad neck. It wasn't, you know, and at that point, like during when I transitioned to pro, I was just coaching just as much as I was, you know, training. And really, that I don't know if I'm jumping forward further than you want to go, but like it really wasn't until I was kind of I had my neck surgery, then my thumb surgery, and I was just cool with like doing my tech sales and coaching my friends and being like a volunteer coach. And I had the management. I was managing guys on the side, and then it was really when Rob was like, "This is 2017." He was like, "Listen, like, I want you to, I want to change. Like, I want to start a new camp. Like, I want you to be the head coach, and you start a new camp for me." And that was really like the leap of faith. It wasn't. I never had any delusions of being a full time coach or doing this full time or anything like that. But it was, oh crap, like this is all right. Like, well, how can we do this? And yeah, it was tough. It was like go back into tech sales or do that. And it was like, all right, I took a leap of faith and I kind of went all in. Unfortunately, my wife was on board. She's like, listen, like, I know you hate tech sales, like, and just do this, And so I did it. Fortunately, Rob trusted me and we did that. And, it's appeared to have paid off. I think we've been pretty successful, but that's obviously based on your opinion. And, but yeah, I mean, it was really, it wasn't a financial decision because like at the end of the day, like I left a lot of money to get a guarantee of no money. It was, all right, these are my brothers. Like Rob was, you know, one of my closest friends at the time. We were training partners. We were beating each other up all the time. We were helping each other cut weight. And it was like a brother asking you, like, hey, I'm in the UFC. I need this. Like, do you want to help? And it was like I had to make that decision of like, all right, am I gonna sounds weird, like am I gonna put my own career in front of his career or am I gonna put his career in front of mine and see if we could turn that into a career? And that's what I did. It was just, the bond is strong in this sport. It's tough. It's tough to find people that you believe in and that believe in you. And I think obviously I feel like it was a great decision, but it wasn't an easy one. Like I really, it was scary leaving like a career and thinking like, what, I'm still paying off grad school loans that I don't need now. But
Oh,
yeah, I think everything
we'll
happened.
get to the scariness of it, and we'll get to the like leap of faith
Yeah.
of it, because like you and I have spoken in the past. I've obviously done my research for this, and just in general, in knowing yourself and Calvin a little bit, and Rob a little bit, and the formation of things, know a bit of the story. But we will get to that part. You mentioned in there, like, I know my record makes it look like, listen, man, 4-3, like I said earlier, above 500. So that's better than a lot of dudes, because there's a lot of dudes that are out there with like delusions of grandeur, with weekend professional fighter slash professional opponent. You sound like, and I, in knowing you, know that you went at this with, I'm going to give it my best, but as you said, understanding maybe limitations and sort of just what your body had for you when it came time to make that decision of, this is the end of the line pro fighting career. What's that decision like? Was it just a thing that the health and the body dictated, okay, it's time? Or did you say it's time to do something else?
It was tough because like obviously I was a wrestler and then a jiu-jitsu guy, and my neck was so trashed that like I couldn't grapple. I couldn't do any wrestling and sparring. So pretty much I would just kickbox, spar, hit mitts, and do strength and conditioning, and then go into fights thinking that I would just like turn on the grappling button and perform. And it was like my last fight, I was like, I remember Rob after my last fight, he was like, "What were you doing?" Like I was like embarrassed. And but it was true because I was like grabbing a leg, pulling guys on top of me, just like taking guys down, but then like jumping over and getting too high on the hooks, like things that I never would have done in the past. And I just realized like it was like a lesson, like I'm not healthy enough to do this right, and like why am I putting my body through this for like nothing? I've had the experience. Like I really thought that like fighting would make me a better coach, and I really believe it did. Like because there's pretty much nothing that these guys have gone through that I haven't been through. Like obviously it's higher level, but they're higher level guys. They're fighting higher level guys. I was fighting guys at my level. I understand like the pros and the cons of different decisions, and I understand like the how hard these waters are to navigate. And I just felt like I have to lead by example. Like you have to know when it's time to hang it up and um, focus on things. Like I felt like I could make a more positive impact on their careers than like trying to hang on to mine. And for what? It was just, and I enjoyed coaching. Like I feel like if I didn't have the coaching, I think I maybe would have competed a little bit longer. But man, I get the same rush just coaching these guys, and it's competitive in a different way, and it's challenging in a different way. So it kind of fills that void that the thing did. But right after I got the neck surgery, I thought I would maybe fight again, and then I had to get. So I had my last fight in October. I had 3 vertebrae fused in December, and then I broke my thumb in my last fight in October, and I had arthritis in the thumb, so they had to fuse my thumb in April. So it was like 6 months of like just being in stitches, laid up, and at the time I had met my now wife like right before my last fight, like in September. So it was like new love. I'm eating all the time. We're getting chubby, and it just felt like the right time. Like I think partly I think fighting a little bit was filling that void I had I was single my whole fighting career, and I think that was kind of filling that, like, it was like a meeting. And then when I met my wife, I felt like I could kind of like fill that void. There was other things to focus on at that point,
Right.
Coaching, and then like, let's try to take care of this lady.
It's funny. You mentioned sort of the like everything sort of coalesced to do the like, well, maybe you just advanced to coaching at this point because there's these other things. It's very similar to the conversation I had with Saif Saud last week, where same sort of deal, right? He had started his pro career. It's down to Jackson Wink. It's going well, but he blows out his knee and he tears his bicep. And he always wanted to coach as well. Like his plan was own a gym. I want to coach. The way he put it was, I want to get to 5-0. I want to have one fight in the UFC, and then I want to coach, because that UFC tag at that time can be the big push. And he got hurt, and he was like, guess this is just the universe telling me it's time to go coach now. You mentioned in there as well that without having your own pro fight experience, you don't think you would be as good a coach as you are now. Now, obviously, you can only speak to your own experience, your own opinion of it, but for you and for your guys, does it feel to you like that piece is vital? Like it's imperative for a coach to have some kind of experience in there, whether it's pro, whether it's amateur, so that you know exactly what these guys are going through?
Well, I think if you look at some of the best coaches never fought, right? And so I don't think it's necessarily imperative that you fought, but there's just certain things that a coach that's never fought, right? Never struggled, never been in those fights, that they can't speak to. Like, I don't care how good of a coach you are. If you're in a tough training session, you walk over to your fighter, like, listen, like, I know you're tired. I know you're this. It's like, no, listen, bitch, like you don't know. You know what I mean? You don't know. Like, you don't know what this pressure is like. You don't know what I'm feeling right now. You haven't done this, So like, I think it opens up a new avenue, or like a whole other book of things you can do to try to get more out of your fighters and build trust with your fighters. Because I think those coaches that come over like, listen, I know you're tired. It's like, no, like you don't know that I'm tired. Like, I'm tired because you see me tired, but you don't know what I'm going through right now. Like, so I think the advantage that someone that has fought has, like, you can go into Calvin going into that 4th round, like, what are you doing? Like, what, you gotta go. Like, like you trust me. It's like, and that he knows that I've been the one sitting on that stool that's maybe not listening and doing things that like I think are right. But like, I'll always say it, like, I've been the fighter and I've been the coach. Like, the fighter have a feel for how the fight's going, but the coach generally will always be able to tell the fighter like how it's being judged, and you might think it in this. And I remember in fights, like, I'd go back and watch the video. I hear my coaches yelling something in the fight. What the fuck is he talking about? That's stupid. And then I go back and watch the fight. I'm like, holy crap. Like, I'm glad I listened, because I would have gotten freaking this or that, because, I didn't even know that was happening. So I just think, like, on the mental side of the whole sport, which is a huge part of the sport, severe advantage to the coaches that have fought before.
Fair. And as we said, it's a thing that applies, right? Like, your guys are going to be different than someone else's guys. Your relationship with them, what they're looking for from a coach, always different for everybody. And I just want to make sure that people understand, you're not saying, as you said off the top, a lot of great coaches never fought. It's not imperative, but for you, it has a big impact and has a big difference with you and your athletes. I know from doing my work on this, I know from talking to you in the past and doing research on this, excuse me, coaching was sort of, I don't want to say a volunteer thing, but like, you were just, as you mentioned, that guy in the gym that was a good spar, that could help guys prepare, that could give them some guidance. How does it go from, sort of the side hustle and the side thing that you're doing to now it's starting to get like, are you cornering guys before we get to the formation? What's the kind of, I guess, what's the depth of things? How much time is being invested into being the volunteer coach and sort of guy that helps everybody on the New England scene?
It was, just helping my teammates. Like, I think I was the most active. It was me and Rick Hahn at the time, like 2009. I think like we had like in a 12-month period, we each had 5 fights. And I think the rest of the team, which was like a young team, because a bunch of UFC guys were at the gym that we were at and they all left. They, just kind of had like a kind of changing of the guards. Like a bunch of fighters left for various reasons and kind of some coaches turned over. So now it was like some newer coaches and then a bunch of new young fighters that were coming up. The guys that used to get beat up by all the UFC fighters were now the only fighters. And that rest of the team, like all the guys that ended up being my teammates, me and Rick each fought 5 times in a calendar year. The rest of the team had like 5 fights total the whole year. And like they were being managed by these other 2 guys. And every time you ask like, hey, when are you fighting? They'd be like, oh, a couple of months. I'm like, who are you fighting? Like, oh, some kid from a karate school out of New York. And it was like no fights that ever happened. So finally, like they just started saying like, hey, will you get me a fight? So that's the kind of how like the management thing and the management thing tied into the coaching thing. Cause now they're like, oh, can you get me a fight? So I would be the one that gets in a fight. And they're like, well, what's the guy's style? And I'd watch video and I'm like, well, here's what he's good at. And then, oh, can you show me what he's good at? Cause I was also like one of the better wrestlers in the gym. And I was the highest rank in jiu-jitsu. So it ended up being like, can you corner me? And then if other coaches weren't around, it's like, hey, Tyson, can you run practice? And then just over time, it was like I was cornering every fighter in the gym. I was running 2 of the 3 team practices per week. And I was getting everybody their fights. And just like little by little, if you're the guy that's always filling the holes in the ship, I was just doing whatever needed to be done. Like, oh, you need help cutting weight, I'll help you cut weight. Oh, you need a sparring partner, I'll help bring someone in. You need a ride to weigh-ins or a drive to the fight or whatever. I was just willing to just help my teammates. And then eventually it became like people just started calling me coach, and next thing I was cornering everybody. They were calling me their coach, and and then eventually Rob goes to the UFC and I'm cornering Rob in the UFC. And, as things just kept progressing for him, it was like more and more responsibility because the risks are higher, the rewards are bigger, and he needed more help. And I just became his guy. Like, whatever needs to get done, it was. And eventually, when you're the one that's always answering the questions, filling the holes, doing the work, like you're the one that they trust. And that's really what it was. And Rob was like probably once I retired, he was like the unofficial team captain because he was the badass on the team, that the guy that was like in the UFC now, and all the younger guys looked up to him, and he was leaning on me as like, well, this is my guy. So then all the other people were like, well, if that's his guy, he's my guy too. So I think it was never like, I didn't try to recruit anybody, like, let me manage you. I didn't try to say, hey, let me corner you. It was just always like, Tyson, you got me. And I was like, whatever you need. And it was always get me fights and corner me and run my sparring and all that. And that's just honestly just how it happened. It was like
Very organic
it's
and
just
kind
very
of
natural,
grew into it.
organic. Yeah.
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 What was that first walk with Rob? What was that first UFC experience like after having the be out there? Oh my God, I got to be here. I got to be able to make that walk. You didn't do it yourself in your own career, but the first time with Rob, what's obviously you're focused on him and you're focused for him, but what's going through your head?
I just, I was learning as I went too. Like I had never cornered a UFC fighter. And I just wanted Rob to win and do well. And going into the fight, it was like we were supposed to fight De Silva, Douglas Andrade, whatever that kid. We ended up fighting him later, but we were supposed to fight him. He pulled out, and then they were like, "Well, you can take George Roop, or we can wait." And the other 2 coaches, they were like, "No, no, no, we can't fight George Roop. He's too good." And fortunately, I had been out to Vegas and trained with George Roop, and he was a great kid. But like, I'm like, I was pretty even with him on the ground at that point, and I know he wasn't probably rolling hard, but like I felt him. I felt him on the ground, and I was like, all right, like Rob can beat this kid. I was like, it's a good matchup, and Rob at the time he was doing really well against taller guys, and so I just like I like the fight, and they were like, no, 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 like we can't take this fight, and then Rob's like, Tyson, what do you think? I was like, honestly, Rob, you can beat this kid. And he's like, all right, let's do it. So we called the other coaches, and then they like made it a point to say like, listen, all right, young grasshopper, you think you know everything. Like, we'll listen to you, but this one's on you. Like you're gonna see what the big leagues are like. And then we went out, and I remember like being so confident that Rob could win. Like I even put money on him. He was like a plus 180. And I think I put like a few $100s on him or whatever. And I remember he got the knockout. And I remember we were walking back. I remember thinking like, I told you, assholes. Like I knew, like what I mean? I was like, I wanted to be like, I told you so, but I was just like, sorry, bro. And I remember like Rob was walking ahead of us doing the whole like high fives, and he was leaving the tunnel in the Mandalay Bay, and he kind of had like a moment right when he left the fans. You get in that tunnel, and all of a sudden he just kind of like looked down, and he just tears started coming down, and the other coach went to run up to him, and I grabbed him, and I was like, no, 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 like just let him have his moment, because it wasn't at that time. Like I just I don't know. No one ever taught me this, but I just realized like this isn't about us. Like, go, you don't need to be part of that moment. Go let him have his moment. And I remember the coach was like insulted that I like took him away from that. But I don't know. It was just my mentality of like, this isn't about us. We're role players. We're the backup quarterback, that the guy that holds the clipboard, but we're still important. But
Yeah,
like
we'll have our
this is
team
him.
moment at some point, but let him
Yeah,
have his
I
individual
want him to
right
have his
now.
moment. And I just remember like part relieved. I was part relieved because I was like, there was gonna be a bunch of like, this is your fault, Tyson. But then also like just super proud of like how far he'd come, because one of his first sparring rounds ever as a MMA fighter was with me years prior, and he was like the easy guy in the room, and then now he's just knocked out George Roop, and I just remember being like super proud. I was like happy that he had that moment. I remember thinking like his girlfriend Kathy in the stands was sitting next to my now wife. I just remember like Kathy's probably so excited, and yeah, I think it was very serendipitous. Like it was, it was pretty cool.
And it was a 4th of July weekend. So for anybody that hasn't looked it up yet, UFC 75, Rob Font, KO, punches, 2 minutes, 19 seconds into the first round. Bantamweight debut, performance of the night bonus. I mean, you probably all these years later haven't crowed about it or had your like I told you so moment. But I'll say it for you. He fucking told you so.
That's the poster right there. See this? The Weidman poster.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful poster. I remember the
Yeah,
event well.
I had that.
Alexis
Yeah, I had
Davis,
that
my
poster.
countrywoman, got thrown on her head in 16 seconds.
Yeah, I had that poster hanging up because that was my first time cornering a UFC fighter, and then this one was my first main event, and then this one was my first time cornering international. I cornered Tony Martin. But yeah, so yeah, that was a big night, man. I'm getting the goosebumps thinking about it, man. It was pretty cool.
So you mentioned a little earlier, 2017, Rob comes to you and is kind of like, look, I want to go in a different direction. What is the state of things for him, for guys in New England at that point, and for you as a coach that leads to the formation of this team that is yourself, Calvin, Rob, and as you mentioned, a couple other regional guys right now that just sort of, I guess, silos yourself off a little bit of this is the group we're going to run with rather than everything else?
I feel like not to be a total nerd, but I feel like it was almost like Game of Thrones. Like there was the Seven Kingdoms or whatever, and like that's what the gyms were like. You had all these gyms that everybody played nice, but everybody was secretly rooting against all the other gyms. They wanted their gyms to beat the other. Everybody wanted the throne, but no one wanted to help the other person get the throne. So it was very like it was tough, man. I call it egos, and that was why I started top game management. Like where I got robbed in UFC, and then other gyms started to reach out, hey, can you manage my guy? And my whole like if I had like a mission statement, it's like make sure the best guys don't fight each other from New England. They need to train together, cross train, and then get to the UFC and win fights. Because at that time, there was like really nobody in the UFC. There was barely anyone. And the guys that were there were, you had Joe Lozon and maybe like Doomsday. But for the most part, like no new guys were getting in the UFC. And it was kind of at that point becoming like, if you want to go to the UFC, you have to leave New England. And like we were kind of known on the national level as kind of like a joke region at that point because we weren't building any fighters, we weren't building any prospects. And then what's happening is like you'd have a guy like Rob in the gym who's an absolute stud, but then you'd have Calvin over here who they weren't training together yet, absolute stud. Well, you know what? We have these stupid local rankings that mean nothing, right? It's cool for an amateur fighter to be like, hey, I'm ranked number one, whatever. Like, but promoters would use those rankings and then feed on the egos of the gym owners and the fighters to say like, no, if Rob doesn't fight Calvin, then you'll never know who's number one. And if you don't beat the number one guy, you'll never go to the UFC. It's like, well, you couldn't prove him wrong because it's like, well, no one was going to the UFC. What was happening is everybody was chewing each other up in the local scene. It's like you were more concerned about being the big gym in the region than you were about actually getting UFC fighters. So my whole plan was like, I'm going to manage these guys. I'm going to scoop up all the prospects and make sure they never fight each other. And even if I don't manage you, I'm not going to have one of my guys. Like if you're truly a guy that I think can go to the UFC and win fights, you're not going to fight one of my guys. If we need to fight a prospect, like if UFC needs to see us get like a good fight, we'll bring someone in, and then that was the whole business model behind it. And then when Rob broke off from the coaching standpoint, so that was like how I did it with the management side. And on the coaching side, I really thought about it for like a week or two. I'm like, let me think about this, Rob, and like get back to you. And I was trying to think of ways that I could save it and like make him stay at the gym. And the whole him leaving the gym thing blew up, and it somehow ended up being all my fault. Like still some people that are bitter about it, and it all fell on me. Like I didn't have anything. Yeah, it is what it is. It's water under the bridge. But I lost some friends in that process, which sucks. But at the end of the day, like my loyalty was to the fighters, and I did what I thought was best for these fighters that were asking me for help. And so I thought on it for like a week or two, and I came back to Rob and I said, listen, if we're going to do this, like, this is how I think we can do it. I was like, we're going to kind of take a little page out of the boxing model, and I'm going to, coach you. And he was kind of like, well, Calvin will probably be with us too. And then, I was like, all right, well, we got you and Calvin, and I'm going to build camps around you guys. And the whole philosophy is like, I'm going to bring in the best training partners, the best coaches, and we're going to build camps around your schedule instead of your schedule being built around the gym schedule. So that's what we do. And we kept the group small, and that's by design. Like, some people look at it like, oh, you only have 4 fighters on the team. It's like, yeah. And they're all awesome. Like, and they're great, and like, yeah, I'm sure there's downsides to small gyms, but like the whole reason we started the cartel was to try chase 2 belts, the featherweight and the bantamweight belts in the UFC. Both guys ranked in the top 5. I think Rob might be 6. He was 3. Anyway, like that was the whole reason. It's like, I'm going to build a camp around Rob and Calvin to make sure that they can chase these belts. And, it's all perspective, whether or not you think it's working or not. But the reality is 8 main events in a row. We're doing something right. And, that's really how it all came together. And we're still getting better every camp. We're trying to change things and figure it out. But like, I made a conceited effort at that point to say, listen, I'm going to coach you guys. And obviously now there's a couple of younger guys underneath that put in the work that deserve the time too. So now it's like 4 guys I coach. I can't coach 10 or 15 guys. If I coach 10, 15, 20 guys, I'm not holding my promise that I gave to Rob and Calvin 5 years ago, which was I'm going to do everything I can to focus on you guys and help you win a belt. And like, if I start coaching 10, 15 guys, I'm distracted. I'm not putting the same amount of time and effort and energy into those 2. So until their careers are done, like that's where we're at.
So is that the piece of it that made that model the way you wanted to go, was to be able to be, maniacally focused on the 2 of them and commit all your energy to them rather than spreading yourself out and having to coordinate 6, 7, 8, 12 different camps, different kind of that piece of it. It becomes about them, sort of, as you said, the boxing model of everything revolves around you, not, hey, pro practice is at 7 p.m. and if you're not here, then the next pro practice is in 2 days.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't what was best for financially for me, like, and it was
right.
because
For you as a
decision,
coach, it's,
yeah,
hey, the
scale,
more body, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
from the tech side of things, it is all about building it out to scale.
But I just think of it as like, I got 3 young kids. At some point, they're going to get old enough, and if they care to, they can go back and watch these videos and read these articles and see quotes that I've made and kind of see the legacy that we made and our journey. And there's integrity in what we're doing. If there's one thing that my kids can take away when they get older, and I want them to be proud of what we did. I want them to say like, all right, he didn't chase the dollar. He made a promise to friends, and he figured out how to monetize it. and, you know, did his best to like keep that promise and like chase this dream and chase a goal. Like you know, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that. Like, you know, you're trying to be a good example for the kids and say like, listen, you gotta work hard, you gotta set goals, you gotta be uncomfortable, and you gotta do what's right, not what's fun, you know, and you gotta do what's right for the fighter, not what's right for my wallet. I just think like there's so many examples that they'll be able to look back to of that can be learning experiences for them because they're going to be faced with decisions like this in the future. Is like, listen, you got to be a good person. Like, you know, you can tell if someone's a good person by what they do when no one's watching, you know, and like when no one's watching, what truly runs through my mind is like, all right, what's the right decision here? Like, all right, this would be easier, but this is what's right for the fighter. That's what we're doing. And so the decisions are easy, but I can see how people slip up and don't do it. And that's like I look at a lot of these other coaches, and there's some great coaches, but I can't I can't think of many that like, thinking of like Rob. Just to think about Rob Calvin, I can't think of anybody that can focus on their fighters as much as they focus on Rob and Calvin, and that just comes from like those are teammates. I cared about them. I made them a promise, and I told them I would do everything I could to try to help get that belt so they could hang it on their wall someday, give it to their parents. Um, and I can't do that if I scale out, you know? So yeah, I know I ramble a lot, but that's kind of
No,
what
no,
it is.
the rambling is always welcome on this program. I will admit that the name was very much a part of what caught my ear the first time and caught my interest the first time because it's a fantastic name, the New England Cartel. But then following that quickly was just the success. Like obviously Rob and Cal were both in the UFC at the time, but the success just kind of kept rolling and kept ramping up. As you guys started to have that success, and as you as a coach start gaining that recognition for the success these guys are having, are the phones ringing off the hook? Are people knocking on the door? Is your phone getting blown up with like, hey, can I come train? How much conversations are there about keeping this group tight to maintain this thing that we're trying to build here?
Yeah, it's definitely a balance because there's got to be a give and take, right? Like especially where I manage a lot of guys that want to come and train with us, and those guys get you know kind of a more of an open door policy than strangers would. Obviously, we don't let strangers in the door, but if you're managed by me, you're kind of like already kind of a cousin. And but even then, like with COVID, it was real tough. That was like you know the COVID years where nobody can come in because we can't risk the fight canceling. But now it's interesting because you get this network of like friends, like either fighters that I'm friends with or other coaches. Like I do network with a lot of other coaches, and they'll call me and ask me for advice on matchups. They're like, "Hey, what do you think about this opponent? What do you think our game plan should be?" Um, Stuff like that. But then even other fighters that reach out that like just have a rapport with because you shared a hotel with them like for weeks on end, or like traveled with them or shared locker rooms, and you get chummy and. You know, people reach out, hey, I'm fighting this person. Like, what do you think? Like, any advice and stuff like that. And then you got fighters that are, hey, can we come out for a week? Can we do this? And we're very choosy with like who we let come in the room. It has to be our stance on that is it has to be symbiotic, and it can't be symbiotic for just me. You know, obviously if they're going to come out here, they're going to get something from it, right? But if they're going to get something from it, they have to give something for it, which is on our end, that's not what's good for me. It's not like, oh, maybe I'll be corner this guy and you know start coaching them. Or, that's not what it's about. It's about can they come and give Rob and Calvin a good push, or the two younger kids on the team, Tom and Nick, can they come and like be a good training partner, add value, and help my guys while we're also helping them, and that's mutually beneficial. So those are the type of people that can get in the room. It can't be just like, hey, like you know, there's some female fighters that have reached out. Like I've had their management reach out and be like, hey, can she come camp with the cartel? And I'm like, no, you know, we don't have any other girls, and I'm not going to focus on like bringing in all these other girls to try to run a camp. That's just going to be a distraction from Robin Calvin. So, um, yeah, there has been people that reach out. It's just not that realistic for you know, it's tough because you feel bad. You know, you like these people, and but until Rob and Calvin are done, I can't do it. Like we can cross train, like, you know, we just went out to Vegas. We trained with Dan and Natan. And like now that we trained with them for 2 weeks in Vegas, those guys, if they ever wanted to come out and like really, like, even if they wanted to come out and do a camp, if Nick Sick called me and said, hey, listen, like Dan needs a different look or something, can he
Right.
come stay with you guys for a month? Whether I'm cornering him or not. Like if you just put Dan through the ringer for a month and just help him. He needs a new look. He needs to get away from the family. He needs to just, you know, go be Rocky for a month. Yeah, like that's different because he helped Calvin. Like we'll help him, you know? And that's where it becomes like it's not about me. It's about like this guy put his life on hold for 2 weeks to help us in Vegas when he's watching his son. Like we can be flexible for him too.
Are there any times when a coach or a fighter calls you and is like, hey, I need your thoughts on this, where you've had to say, and you don't have to, we don't need names or anything, but are there times where it's like, look, I just I can't help you with this because relationship, because whatever, or that it's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I can't give you my blueprint for this guy because we may.
I yeah, I always, you know, like Eric Nixon called after the Ige fight. He was like, "Hey, listen, like, you know, I'd love to see how you put together the camp for Ige." So I sent him our game plan. Like, I didn't give him the call signs or anything, but I just sent him my notes. I do a big scouting report, which is like a big scouting report, and then I put like the game plan. And I put like, you know, strengths, weaknesses, all that stuff. I spell it out. It ends up being like a 4 or 5 page Word document, bunch of bullet points, and then I make a, you know, basically just this is the strategy of the fight, and I give like an elevator pitch version and then a long form version. And I sent that to Eric, and I was like, listen, like we need Ige to do well now, you know. So like I give him my perspective on like, yeah, you know, it's a self serving, right? But it's call a spade a spade. Like Ige wins, that's better for Calvin, and he honestly he is a good kid too. So it's like. So now Eric getting fresh perspective on like, all right, this is what another coach sees as my fighter's deficiencies, you know, and then hopefully he can get in the gym and fill those holes. Um, and you know, he did similar to me. But there's times where like a coach will call me and say, "Hey, I got this person fighting this person. Like, what do you know?" And I'm like, "Coach, I can't. Like, I'm friends with that girl's coach or this and that. Like, I got to stay out of this one." And I never cut those corners. Like, I just assume that everything I communicate is going to be posted in some chat board for people to view whether I was a scumbag or not, and they'll never be able to say I'm a scumbag. So, um, yeah, and they respect that. You just say, "Hey, listen, sorry, I can't do this one." I know when Nick Six started working with Garbrandt a little bit, he called me up and said, "Hey, you got your notes on Cody? I'd love to see him." And I sent him over my notes on Cody, and um, the same again. I want Cody to do well now, so it's like, you know, it's yeah. There's gonna be times where you have to say no, but for the most part, like I'm willing to share information and try to help these guys get better because I need their help sometimes too. I'm not delusional to think that I know everything.
Right. Yeah, I laugh, and if the recording is working properly and the video is working properly, nobody would have seen the laugh because I will be off screen. You would have seen Tyson. I'm muted back here, but I laugh because it's a thing we talk about as analysts, as media and things like that, of fights and victories aging well, right? We like they either age really well or it doesn't age so well. And like as an athlete and as a coach, you're looking for these wins that just look better and better and better. I mean, this weekend we're taping this on October 19th, so a couple days out from UFC 280. And one of the ones that always sticks out to me is that Islam Makhachev win over Arman Tsarukyan a few years ago. Didn't seem like it meant that much at the time. Tsarukyan's just coming into the UFC. But now as we're getting ready for Islam fighting for the title, Arman's in the top 15, and you now go, okay, we now
Yeah.
have a little bit better understanding of it. So it makes complete sense. Before we pivot to some other stuff, how did the two young guys that are on the team, Nick Fiore and Tom Pagliarulo, how did they become part of the actual team to where they are now folded into the cartel?
So when the pandemic kind of kicked off, and then Rob had tore his ACL and got surgery, Rob started doing a lot of like one-on-ones with people just for some extra cash while he's going to be out for a year rehabbing. And he started working with the young fighter Tom Pagliarulo, and he was an amateur fighter at the time, and so he just started doing some privates with him, and then that turned into, hey Rob, will you corner me for this fight? And then Rob reached out and it's like, hey, can you? He's got this like amateur title fight. Can you watch some video and put together like a little game plan? So I did that for him, and then he just started bringing him to like some of the practices. Obviously, he's coming in through Rob. It's, if Rob wants to bring a new fighter in, that's up to Rob. It's like you know, I can't. I'm not going to bring a new fighter in and say, hey, Rob, you have to train with this person now. But if Rob brings a new guy in that he passes the sniff test, and so he's in through Rob, and he just started coming to all the sessions. And then next thing you know, he's like, oh, can you corner me? And so I started cornering him with Rob. And next thing you know, he's like, hey, I'd love to get managed by you. So I signed him to Top Game, and he was just showing up to all the practices. And then he left the old gym that he was at. So now next thing you know, he's in the room all the time. And then Rob had been going up to a jiu-jitsu school in New Hampshire to roll with this young kid, Nick Fiore, who's the fourth kid on the team. He's still only 24. And this kid's like a phenom on the mat. Like, he's just one of those, like a young version of a Donahar. Like, he's very analytical, super, super good grappling. He's got good judo, good wrestling, and then he hits hard too. So he's 5-0 pro with 5 first-round finishes. So Rob, Calvin, and Tom are going up there, getting some rolls in. That means Nick starts coming down and doing some of our drilling classes. And then one day, Nick's just like, hey, Tyson, like, would you want to manage me? And he had a coach that was managing him at the time, so I was never going to like encroach. And I was like, well, as long as your coach is cool with it, And then he's like, yeah. And then so I started managing him. And then next thing you know, I was at all the practices, and then he was getting a fight, and he's like, hey, can you guys corner me? And then I think in June he left the gym that he was at, and he's with us full time now. And really, to make a cap off a long-winded answer, it was like these two guys were adding value to Rob and Calvin, giving them good bodies, giving them good looks, like being gophers when they needed to be gophers. They were like, being not punch bags literally, but, being there, being the guy that, they need to drill with. And Nick's obviously teaching him jiu-jitsu, and Tom's a good wrestler, so he's getting good wrestling looks. And so these guys were just putting in the work, and they were helping Rob and Calvin get better. And so we had to pay it forward to them. So it was like, again, it was mutually beneficial. They were helping Rob and Calvin, so we're going to help them. And, they travel with the team, like we'll fly out to Vegas this weekend. I'll fly tomorrow with Calvin, but Tom will fly out on Sunday, and Nick would have too, but Nick's got some other commitments he's going to do. So Nick will come out in corner, but Tom will be with us on fight week the whole time. So he'll be out there working with us because he's going to fight in November. So, we try to travel with these guys too, bring them on the road, get them to see the UFC experience. So that way, by the time they get in the UFC, it's just going to be like another thing for them.
Yeah, anybody that watched some of your content and Cal's content last week will see everybody at the PI, or very recently ago, everybody at the PI, everybody getting working together, traveling together, as you said. And I've always agreed with and understood. And there are a lot of different people, lots of different gyms that do that as well, of the like, bring the young guy so that when they get here, it's just experience. It's just old hand. They know what's going on. It's not deer in the headlights moments. I mentioned sort of pausing for a minute to get to the young guys. We got to get to some of the, maybe not unfortunate, but just it's the breaks of the game. It's the things that happen when you're fighting the elite of the elite. Cal's last result doesn't go the way that you would like. Split decision loss to Josh Emmett. Rob's last couple of fights haven't been the results he would like. What is the process like for you guys, for your team, for you specifically as a coach, in dealing with those setbacks, in addressing them, and then building from them? And how does it change day after to 2 weeks after to a month after? Is there a progression of things, or are you coming out right out of the gates with, look, man, we got to talk about what went wrong?
Every loss is different, and like my first reaction to loss is to try to make sure the fighter's healthy. Like that's paramount. And then after that, I'll internalize, and then I'll talk to some of the other coaches, like what went wrong, like what could we have done? Here's maybe what went wrong in the fight, but like why did that go wrong? Like, could we have delivered that message differently in camp? Did we not drive the point home correctly? Like, why was he doing this when we said all camp not to do it? Like, rather than pointing fingers, I try to think like, all right, like how do we deliver this wrong? And I think that approach like helps burden the blame off the fighter a little bit. It helps absorb some of that. Like, you go to them, it's like, listen, like, I know crap went wrong, this happened, but here's what I think we can do to fix it. Like, I should have been better. Try to take ownership. I always say it's like shine the light on them when they win, and wave the lights over when they lose, like take the blame when they lose to try to like let them lick their wound, so to speak, and not have to think about any of that. And at the end of the day, if a fighter goes out and fights poorly, like that is on us, like we have to get them prepared to fight, um, and perform on fight night. And if they go out there and have a flat night, then we have to think like, well, what do we do to contribute to that? And so a big part of what I do is really self-reflection, and then talk to the other coaches and see like, hey, what did you think? What do why is this? But you see a lot of coaches like, I don't know. I told them to do this and you just wouldn't listen. Like, what can I do? That's not really going to get the fighter better. At the end of the day, like when these guys win, like I know I play a role, but it's not like I don't take credit. It's not about that. So the team got to win. When we lose, it's like, all right, like I have to like absorb this and like kind of shield them from like a lot of the BS and figure out like, all right, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you have Calvin losing to Max, but then the way he bounced back, it was perfect. That's how you want to bounce back after a big loss to Max. And then Rob's in a different situation. It was almost like we had two of the same fights. Fights where we land record numbers, significant shots in a fight, but still lose. Because the big shots landed on us. And there's some things that we think like, damn it, like sometimes it's hard to see what's it saying? Hard to see the trees through the woods, or see the woods through the trees, or what's that saying?
Hard to see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, see the forest for the trees. And I think sometimes coaches get in that. We're on this 4-fight win streak, and now we fight Jose Aldo, and we're like, oh, okay, one got away from us. We just needed to. We got clipped, and then the next fight, the same thing happened. So like, what do we need to do technically to shore up some of Rob's defense? That's more on us than it is on him. Like, and then go back and watch those last two fights. It's like, seems glaringly obvious some of the things that were going wrong, and it's like, well, how do we not see that? And it's just things, life gets in the way, things happen, and we can make excuses all we want, but the reality is like we let one go and then we let two grow. It's not acceptable. And unfortunately, like it's like the fighter is the one that has to pay for that, like financially and physically. So it's like, all right, well, we learned a lesson there, shame on us that it took two to learn that lesson. But like, I really do feel like we've got a good handle on like what Rob needs to like change, what we need to get Rob to change, like going into his next fight, and just a couple tactical things, and I think he's still right there, and then Calvin coming off a loss like he did, man, that's frustrating. Like it doesn't get any more frustrating than that. Like we, as far as I'm concerned, he wins next week, we're on a 3-fight win streak. We're 2 wins in Chris Lee. It's like
so I wasn't going to bring up the name, and I wasn't
Yeah.
going to ask like specifics, but I mean, you've already sort of mentioned it in there of like, there's nothing more frustrating. I was going to ask which one's harder to take. You lose a fight, Rob loses the fight to Marlon Vera, or Cal loses a split decision to Josh Emmett. And I think you already answered it they're very different, but Emmett is
Emmett's much more frustrating because it's a big money play, like for Calvin's life. You don't get that second check, which he was on a brand new contract for that fight. So that's a lot of money. And then realistically, Calvin wins that fight. We're definitely fighting for an interim title. Like right now, there seems to be like, oh, does Emmett deserve it? Does he not? Because it's just the way that the win happened. And he's kind of had that win against us. And even the Ige fight, like I thought when I scored that one live, I thought Ige won. And then going down to the Burgos fight, I thought Burgos could have gotten that decision. So he's had a lot of like close wins. It hasn't been like decisive. And then I think kind of like the way he acted after the fight didn't help with fans. I'm not saying he was wrong for the way he acted, but you can't kind of like just say like, if Calvin got the decision that night, he would not have been saying I'm the best in the world, giving my title shot. He would have been apologizing for his performance and saying I need to be better. I got away, I need to be better than that. I'm not happy with how I performed. What's next is up to the UFC. I don't know what I earned off that performance. That's up to them. And I think you get a lot more with humility in the eyes of the fans than you do with the approach that he had, which, like I said, like nothing wrong with what he did, but I just don't think it sat well with a lot of people, especially when they see how he got the decision. You can't stand there with one eye closed and say jabs don't matter and I dominated the fight when Calvin's over here like icing his hands. Well, you're icing your one good eye. It's just, and then to look at the scorecards and then still try to defend and say that you won that 4th round when it was clearly like a pretty one-sided round. I just think like a lot of that put together, it just didn't sit well. So I think had the decision gone the other way and Calvin acted how he always would have acted, I think it would have been like we're fighting a year for an interim title shot right now, no questions asked. But I think right now the division's very much in flux because people kind of don't really know what to do. You know, Ortega got hurt. Emmett, did he win? Did he not win? You know, the majority is going to say, no, I don't think he won. You know, the media scorecards that night, and I think the general public vote MMA, like it's usually a pretty good litmus test if you look at all those things, and everybody swayed to us. So, I mean, the UFC thinks we won. You know, Dana came and told us we won. The matchmakers have told us they think we won. So it's like, but we didn't. You know, so at the end of the day, like I said, we're two. We got to get this next win. It will be 2 wins in Chris Lee, and we get a convincing win against Arnold Allen. It's a big debate. You know, like so we right now we do have a lot of power. We go out there and perform. Yeah, I know I'm drifting on here, but like it does make
No, it's
things very
good.
interesting. But either way, it's
Good. It
super
throws
frustrating.
me.
Like, but
It moves me
it's
into
frustrating.
my next sort of area. And the last thing I will ask about fighter specific stuff and fight specific stuff. You mentioned Calvin has a big fight coming up. We will run this on Monday, so it will be Calvin Kattar, Arnold Allen fight week by the time this drops. How important was it for Cal to have a relatively quick turnaround here? It's 4 months and a little bit. To have a performance like that, to have a little bit of that sour taste in the mouth, and then get an opportunity like this against the kid that's unbeaten in the UFC, 9-0, 11-0 in his last 11 fights, like on a really nice run, to get an opportunity like this to go out relatively quickly when everybody else is sort of not on the sidelines in a bad way, but like nobody else has anything really booked at the top of the division, that he can go out and maybe stop this kid's unbeaten run.
Yeah, I think it's he had that year that he sat out after Max, and that whole time he was just chomping at the bit to go. And we had to hold him back. We're like, listen, like rest. You know, we'll get better technically, but we can't go hard yet. We rest, and that paid off. And then this one, he came out of this fight, like I said, came out of the fight. Emmett, the only thing that hurt was his hand. You know, he literally could have, like, if he won that fight, that was mid-June. If he had gotten the decision there and that year Ortega pulled out, he could have fought. You know, like Emmett definitely couldn't have. But so like we were healthy enough to go, but now it was just like he's frustrated. It's when you get to the point where he's at his career and on these contracts, like the money is a big difference when you lose. You know, obviously it's always half, but when it's half of a decent number, that's hard, man. You know, you're out here trying to buy houses, you're trying to, change your family's lives, and not getting an additional 6 figures is like, that's tough, man. And you feel that, because you look at your bank account at the end of the year and you're just like, oh, there should be this much more in there, and it was, and in the way it happened. So Calvin's pissed, he's itchy to get back in there. He's itchy to make the next guy pay. And he doesn't care if it's Arnold Allen or whoever it is, Calvin he just wants to fight, win, and get one step closer to his goal, which is winning a title. And Arnold Allen made the most sense. Like we got the fight that made the most sense. We fought the highest ranked guy available. The only fight that would have been better than this is if we fought Yair for an interim title, or got a rematch with Emmett, but like realistically, we're not going to fight up based on the situation where the division's at right now. So, okay, we'll fight we're 5, he's 6. So it's the highest ranked guy available, 9-fight win streak in the UFC. Like, you go and beat a guy like that, like after beating a guy like Emmett and beating a guy like Giga, who was on a 7-fight win streak, it's an impressive run he's on. Yeah, so Calvin, extra chip on his shoulder. Chris Lee better not be a judge that night. I just don't see how he could be, but yeah, he's pissed off. He's ready to get back in there and just show like that he's better than what he did. He's frustrated with his performance. He wants that, he wants to just like wipe that one away. He's healthy and get this 3rd win in a row.
So I want to pivot if we can before I let you get out of here. Obviously, you mentioned off the top, you are one of 6 siblings. That means you are a son as well. You are a husband, you are a father, and you are doing all of these things while being a coach and running management and traveling. how do you balance it all? How do you find the time? What are the things that help you make all of this work? And I have a feeling I know answer number one, because it's my answer number one when I get asked the same thing. And it's the lady that allows me to call her my wife. But like, what is it for you that are the keys to making all of these pieces work and fit together as well as they do?
I admittedly I don't know that I make it work as well as I could. You know, it's
Fair.
I struggle with that. You know,
Yep.
that's not to be vulnerable, but like it is tough. You know, I'm missing birthdays. I'm missing. You know, I didn't go to a single flag football thing for my son this year. It's it's tough. You know, and you hope when they get older and they become passionate about something that they'll appreciate it. You know, but you can't get this time back, and it is hard. It's yeah, it's tough. It's like, and I think what makes it tough too is that like I don't have a boss. You know, so I don't have I can't say sorry Sarah, like the boss called me in. She can't get mad at the boss. She's gonna get mad at me. You know, I think that makes it hard is that there's just very few people that really understand what I do and like really understand the level of commitment that I have and like the mindset that goes into this whole sport on the fighter side and like the things that I think that I feel compelled to do on the coaching side from a commitment like a time commitment standpoint. There's just some things that people just don't understand and they never will understand no matter how much I explain it to them. They'll never understand why certain things have to be done and why certain things are important. Um, so that makes there's like a disconnect with like what what people like me do and what we perceive to need to do, you know? And you know, and that's why honestly I could be better at it, but I can honestly I have like literally no hobbies. Like if I'm not working, I'm literally at home with my kids. Like I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, like I don't go to bars. Like I don't have bro trips. There's no like annual bro weekend. Like my bro time is traveling with the fighters. You know, that's what I do. And like we'll have our fun there, but it's still work. Like I don't hunt. Like literally like if you ask my wife what my hobbies are, I watch UFC fighting, right? I watch the UFC fights. I don't even watch like Bellator and any of those. I literally watch UFC and I watch Formula One. I don't even watch the Patriots anymore. Like I give up. I was a lifelong Patriots fan. I don't even watch football anymore because it's like Sundays I could spend time with my kids or be with my kids or be more present. Like that's a day that we don't train. Like I can try to spend more time with them. And um yeah, it's like if I'm not working, I'm with the family. And even then I feel like I'm still missing a lot, you know, and I am fortunate that you know, I still have a wife and she understands that like the fighters, you know, it really is it's what I'm passionate about. And hopefully when the kids get older, they'll realize like I hope as a dad, I hope my kids can find something like I found. And I think that's the only way they'll ever really be able to understand the sacrifices that I'm making.
Well, and I would imagine, and I can't speak to this myself as I don't have children, but I can only imagine that it's tougher with younger kids because the understanding of what's happening and the recognition of what's happening isn't quite there yet. It's just that daddy has to go away and daddy's gone again.
Yeah. And it's tough because then the young kids are harder, you know, so it's harder on my wife. And I know, you know, that puts a strain. And you know, so they have rough days like where they, you know, FaceTime isn't enough. You know, it's like it's great. We're lucky we have it, but there's nothing like coming home and hugging my little daughter and having her get excited and stuff like that. So it is tough, you know. I was just gone for 13 nights and now I'm about to be gone for 11 nights, you know, after being home for 20 nights. It's it is a lot, you know, and And this is with me only coaching 4 fighters. You know, I don't know how those guys that have 20 guys in the UFC do it. I don't know. It's try to feel that balance. And like the only way I figured out so far is just it's work and kids, like work and family. Like there's nothing else. Like, you know, I would love, I would love to have bro trips on the weekend. It's just maybe when the kids get older, we'll do bro trips with them, right?
Yeah, I laugh every once in a while. Listen, you and I sound very, very similar, right down to the there's a Sarah. Um, yeah, I'm the same way. Like I work and then I'm with my family. Now that includes this 70-pound pit bull that is probably going to be part of the family officially within 2 weeks. And then it's like just figuring everything out around what my work schedule is. And I don't even have to go anywhere. It's just a matter of, well, on Saturdays, Spencer sits in the den and watches fights and has to write stuff. So I can't imagine, man. I can't imagine the difficulty of balancing those two things because there's a personal pride to it. There's a personal want for success. There's a want for success and achievement and to be there for your guys. But then there's also that tug and that anchor of home. And I don't mean anchor in a bad way. I mean that like your heart is there that goes,
Responsibility.
yeah, of like, man, are there times, have there been fights for either guy that you haven't been there for? Like, have there been times where it's, I can't do this one. Like I need to be home.
Nah, man, it's like no, like I almost missed. This is before Rob. I was cornering Doomsday. My wife's water broke for our oldest son while I was in Vegas cornering Doomsday, and I jumped on it early. I cornered him that night, and then jumped on an early flight the next morning. I got home in time. I cornered Rob and Calvin at the TD Garden on my wife's due date for our second child. Fortunately, that was in Boston, so it was like an hour away. But like the state police were there, and they're like, I gave Jolos on my phone. My wife was gonna call him if the water broke. I was cornering 2 guys, and the state police were like, "We're gonna escort you to your car. We'll get you back up to New Hampshire." It was like all set up for if the water broke, and it didn't. And then, man, I delayed my mom's funeral by a week because I had already promised a fighter that like, their coaches couldn't go to a Bellator fight with them. So I was going to go handle them all week, and I wasn't even cornering them. I was like, I'll go to Connecticut with you. I'll stay in the hotel with you, help you cut weight, get you to fight. His coaches were just showing up the corner, and I had already made that commitment to him. So like I asked my family, um, can we do this the next week? Because I'm, you know, I don't want to leave this kid hanging. I don't know if that makes me like noble or sick, right? Like I don't know. Like I just didn't want to let the kid down, and yeah, so we delayed the funeral. Like that's I don't know, man. It's such a brotherhood that like I just don't want to let these guys down, And obviously with Robin, and that wasn't even Robin Calvin. That was like a guy that I just managed. And it's tough, man. Like the only thing I'm missing for my kids is when I have responsibilities. It's not there's no hobbies, there's no like, oh sorry, I gotta get a workout in. It's like no, like it's if I'm not with the fighters, it's I'm with the family.
Yeah, I think you messaged me once that you were like, listen, if we're not in the gym and or we're not at fight week, I'm at home with my kids, so we can always do these things. We can always have these calls. I understand. I appreciate that very much because if I'm not out with my family, it's like when I try to set up interviews and stuff, people are like, what time works for you? I'm here all the time. You tell me what works for you. We'll work around your schedule. I appreciate you working around your schedule for this. This has been great, man. Before we go, plug not necessarily the sponsors or the socials, but you could do those as well. But just let people know what's happening with the New England Cartel, when to check these guys out next, and whether they can follow all of these guys and yourself.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's Tyson_Chartier, and the cartel page is any cartel MMA. Try to keep everything updated. Obviously, Calvin's got his fight when this airs. It'll be this weekend. Main event against Arnold Allen. Tom and Nick, the young kids, they're going to fight November 19th for Combat Zone in New Hampshire. And then everybody's asking when Rob's next fight is. Rob will probably ideally March or April. He's having a baby in December, and then, we'll give him a month or two to kind of adjust to that. and then we'll be asking for a bout agreement for, March or April. So yeah, I mean that's really all it is. And anybody wants any cartel merch, it's newenglandcartel.com. We sell some swag on there. People seem to like it. So yeah, man, this is fun.
Well, like I said, I appreciate getting your time. I appreciate you coming on. Go check out all of their stuff. They are great follows on social. I follow them. It's not just because Tyson's here and we're friends and we communicate regularly. Good follows. It's good content. Go check it out. Thank you for watching this. If you like it, if you enjoy it, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit us with comments. Let us know some people that you'd like to see on here. For now, he has been Tyson Chartier. Am I giving it right? Do we go full
Chartier?
Chartier. We go
Yeah.
Boston. We go Chowda.
We'll go Boston.
Okay.
Chartier.
Okay. Tyson Chartier. I'm Spencer Kyte for Severe MMA. This has been a conversation with. We'll see you next week.